Good morning. Hank Green recently made a video on criticism, and that got me thinking about the worst piece of criticism I have ever received. This criticism came in my creative writing fiction course when I was in college at the University of North Texas, and it has stuck with me. Now, don't get me wrong, it doesn't bother me so much anymore, but it stuck with me. But before I get to that, I need to tell you a little story. When I was in college, I took this creative writing course, and creative writing courses typically go like this, particularly the fiction ones. You write 2 short stories, and the first third of the class is teaching you how to write those stories, and the second and third thirds of the class are spent workshopping those stories. Also, side note, if you're going to take one of these kinds of courses, you want to go on the first day of the workshops. With your first story, no one really knows what they're doing when it comes to critiques, so they're just a little bit nicer. I mean, that goes away the second time, but it is nice for the first time. And also, after you finish your second story, you have a ton of time to revise that some of these people who want to go on the last day don't have. So I had written my first short story, I had submitted it to the class, and it was time to workshop. Now, in order to understand this piece of criticism, you need to understand 2 things. My story was about a guy who gets shot, and I called it Happiness is a Warm Gun. So for the most part, people were either indifferent to the title or actually liked it. But then there was this one guy. He did not like the title. And it wasn't because he didn't think it fit the story or thematically it wasn't a powerful enough title. No, he didn't like it because it was probably his favorite song by his favorite band. This is incredibly petty and problematic as a criticism, but it stuck with me. It bothered me so much that he didn't like the title simply because he liked the song. And he hated the idea that I would ever desecrate his favorite band, the Beatles, by naming my story after one of their songs. By the way, just so we're clear, the Beatles, also one of my favorite bands. There's a reason I picked their song title. It wasn't just that this was a petty piece of criticism. It affected me in a very negative way, to the point where none of his criticism was valid to me. It didn't matter if it was actually valid criticism. I didn't care. Now, this was on me. This was incredibly problematic on my end. But it gets a little bit worse than that. Because it wasn't just the criticism that I invalidated. It was him as a person. When I read his stories, and I don't remember what his second story was, but his first story had a premise that I thought was really weak, and it wasn't really working for the story he wanted to tell. That was my opinion, of course. I remember thinking his story was terrible. But of course it was terrible. All of our stories were terrible. We were learning how to write them. So it wasn't fair of me to even say, oh, this story is terrible, simply because he didn't like the title of mine. That was awful of me. It was super petty. Because, see, his criticism turned me into a petty person. And I do have to wonder how he received my criticism. Did he read it and go, wow, this guy's a jerk? Was this because I didn't like the title of his story? This was 12 years ago. And in those 12 years, I guarantee you there have been times that I have received bad criticism. Maybe even worse than that, but it's the only one that stuck with me. And I guarantee you it has negatively affected the way I have viewed those people. And it's something that I have to learn how to get better at doing. Criticism is something you're always going to get, and sometimes you have to block out the bad so you can hear the good. But sometimes that bad is just as useful. You should be grateful for all kinds of criticism that comes your way. And you will be criticized. In the same way that I will continue to be criticized. I mean, I make a lot of crap on YouTube. Do you really think that it's all well received? So in thinking about this criticism, I've actually started to wonder if I've ever given out criticism that seemed petty to someone else. I don't know, because I have never given that any kind of thought. Now, I doubt this guy's making YouTube videos about me, and I really doubt that anything I said about any of his stories has affected him the way he affected me, because I have that kind of a personality where things stick with me way longer than they really should, and it's hard for me to let go of stuff. But it has taught me an important lesson. Don't be petty with your criticism, and don't allow petty criticism to make you petty back. Because all that's going to do is make you a bitter, sad shell of a person. On the other hand, I did call my second story You Can't Always Get What You Want, and he didn't like that either. So forget him. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.